Yes.
So we'll able, is it muted?
How do I share it? I'm trying to share it. Sorry. Okay.
So you can confirm people hearing you. When you're about to start, you can confirm people are hearing you.
Who is that?
Able will introduce us. Yeah, Mary. Just one more. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes, we can hear you.
Welcome to today's webinar. I'm your moderator for the day. My name is Ebo Mongela. The topic for the day is crowdfunding as a capital raising option for startups. And the presentation will be divided into two. So first we'll look at startups, and then we will look at crowdfunding. I will introduce the panelists for the day. We have Njomo Kamau, who's the director for Neteria. And we also have Rachel Olinga, who's an associate advocate in Neteria. Please feel free to use the chat box to write down your questions or comments. We will share the slides at the end of this presentation, and we will also share the video. I think over to you, Njomo.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me clearly? Morning again. Morning, everyone. And welcome to this webinar hosted by Neteria International. Today we'll be talking about crowdfunding as a fundraising option for startups. And I'm here with my colleague, Rachel Olinga. So I will begin by taking you through the basics of a startup as under the Kenyan system. And then we'll go into the issues of crowdfunding and what are the options available for startups under the Kenyan laws and operation. So we'll begin by just talking about what a startup is. So basically a startup is a company which is in the initial stages of carrying out its business. So it's a company or an entity that's just been formed to carry out business in this country and also globally, and is at a stage when it is starting to get its feet and trying to get into the marketplace, trying to get its business going, to sell its products and services. And normally it's funded by one or more entrepreneurs who want to develop or introduce a product or service into the market. So a new disruptive innovation or technology or product, which they then feel is something they want to go to market with, and they decide to come together. It can be one individual, it can be more than one individual. They decide to come together and start off the entity, and therefore then become startups. So these kind of entities then start with high costs and limited revenue. And so they have to look for capital from a variety of sources. So normally until they get off the ground, they are financed by founders, by friends, by family, and therefore they have to make efforts to attract outside investment to finance their growth. So they look to external sources to then get funding so that they can grow the capital base and be able to expand their operations. So let us look at what a startup entails in Kenya. Until recently, we did not have, the Kenyan system did not have a forum for addressing the issue of startups. It's only in the recent past that we've had more and more companies being formed, especially by young people or people with aspiring dreams and aspirations to launch a product or a service in the country. And therefore, to complement this, there was a startup bill which was published by the Senate in September 2020, and the Kenya Gazette. It's in supplement number 163. It was pushed to basically address the issue of startups, and is currently awaiting debate by the Senate and National Assembly before it is enacted. So given the current situation, it's not clear whether this will be done within the current term of the parliament, because we only have eight months to go to the general election. But in essence, the aim of the bill is just to provide formal recognition and support to startup businesses in Kenya, so as to foster a culture of innovative thinking and entrepreneurship. So basically, support young people or people who are then intending to start businesses and give them a kind of framework within which to operate and be able to get the ideas off the ground. So the bill intends to allow for the registration of startups through incubation programs and enable the linkage of startups with private investors, financial institutions, the private sector, research institutions, and other institutions at the county, national, international level who can help those kind of startups grow to become viable businesses. The bill also helps to facilitate investment in startups, to create a framework through which third parties can then invest in the startups. It also facilitates the provision of fiscal and non-fiscal support to startups in Kenya. So then it's also supposed to allow for the government and other agencies to come together and assist startups to flourish in the country. It also promotes an enabling environment for the establishment, development, and conduct of business and regulation of startups. So again, a framework, enabling framework, through which someone who aspires to start a business can then look to then be able to get the idea off the ground. It also establishes incubation facilities at the national and county levels of government, and establishes an environment that allows the establishment of startups, and monitors and evaluates the legal and regulatory framework to encourage the development of startups in Kenya. So it is interesting that the bill does not expressly state what a startup is, but then it includes a definition of a startup incubator as an entity whose principal object is the support of the birth and development of startups, innovation, and related activities related to the transfer, technological and research, development and innovation processes through the offer of dedicated physical spaces and services advice. So we feel that is a loophole in the act because it's not clear what essentially defines a startup in the country. But then by looking at the issue of the startup incubator, we get an idea as to what someone needs to do to be registered as a startup. So in essence, under the bill, for one to be registered as a startup and admitted into such an incubation program, the entity has to be registered in Kenya and the ownership has to be at least 1/3 Kenyan. So basically introducing a local content element. Being newly registered has to be in existence for no more than 7 years from the enactment of the bill. So given that the bill is still has not yet come into force, it is not clear whether any company that is a startup at this moment will then fall within the ambit of the bill for when the bill comes into force. But the longer it takes to be enforced, then the more current startups are being excluded from that bill. Then the startup to be admitted has also got to be involved in innovation, development and production of and commercialization of innovative products, processes or services, and has its headquarters or a branch in Kenya. And must also attribute 15% of its expenses to research and development. So these are very, very defined, detailed requirements for that startup to be considered, to be admitted into the incubation program. But it's noteworthy that the entity is not eligible to be registered as a startup if it's established due to a split, or reconstruction, merger, or reconstitution of an existing business, or if it is a holding company or subsidiary of an existing entity that is not registered as a startup. So it must be an entirely new and innovative idea, a company that has basically been formed, an entity that has been formed from scratch and is basically starting off its operations in the country. So we now come to the issue of the capital raising by startups and the challenges which are experienced by startups. So by its very nature, a startup, of course, brings out the element of risk because it's a new entity. It has no funding, limited funding. It is new in the market. It's trying to get its feet on the ground. And therefore, people are less likely to take chances on an entity which is not already established. They want to come in and invest in something which is already running, whose figures they can see how it's been operating on the ground, and therefore can make an informed decision as to whether to put in money or not. So because of this high risky nature of the startups, the banks are not willing to take a chance, on this new startup, on the startup owners, on the budding business owners. And there's also a low appetite by financiers across the board. So you'll find it's very difficult for someone with a startup to go into an existing financial institution, a bank, and try and get ask requests for money, or try and have the institution invest in the startup to help its growth. So as stated earlier, the financiers tend to focus on high growth potential. So one really needs to have a very good business case, so that traditional financiers such as venture capital funds are able to invest because they prefer established entities with high growth in return. So basically an entity which has been running for some time and has some solid figures to show for its operation for that period. There's also the issue of lack of collateral. So most startups are service-based businesses, with a new cash flow business model that has not been tried and tested yet. So then traditional bank loans generally are made against a business assets, but because this business is new, you'll find that it does not have any significant collateral to issue for the loans to be provided by the financial institutions. And therefore, then these firms don't meet that underwriting criteria for such financial institutions, especially the big banks. So what are the general capital funding sources for startups? So then most of the time, the main source of funding for startups comes from one's own savings. So basically then the startup owner has to pull together funding from himself, from friends, first see to what he has, what he or she has, what they have put together to start the business. So the advantages are it's easily accessible because it's your own money, but the drawbacks are that, of course, there's a risk of losing the savings if the business is not successful. The second option is the family and friends option, where people reach out to those close to them, their family and their friends, and ask them to basically take a leap of faith and invest in them due to that existing ties, of kinship or friendship. The good thing with this is that then one can leverage on those relationships to access funds. People who are related or have been friends for a long time are more willing or more ready to invest in a startup. The drawbacks are that, of course, because someone has lent you the money, then there's a risk because the person then expects to be paid. And should the money to the startup not work or the business then not take off, there's a risk of one jeopardizing the personal relationships one has with the family and friends who have invested in the product or in the startup. The third option is a credit or overdraft option, whereby one can go to a financial institution again and then request or open up an account and try and ask for a credit or overdraft facility. Again, it's easy to access in the sense of setting up the account, but there's also the drawback where it's expensive. Sometimes the requirements are also very stringent in the sense that they require, for example, some will require audited financial statements for a couple of years, or they want to see a very robust growth plan, with their financial expectations set in there before they can make that decision. There's also the issue of high interest rates on such an overdraft if it is provided. The next option is also a bank loan, which is basically where then one approaches a bank for a direct loan. And it is also a reliable system of financing because it's backed by a financial institution which is reputable in the country. The drawbacks are again the formalities in terms of setting up or applying for the loan. The collateral which is required, as stated earlier, most startups don't have any collateral. They don't have any assets which they can use to secure the bank loan. There's also high interest rates which are applicable on the loan, which could also cripple the startup. The other option is equity investors. This is where now one approaches venture capitalists or private equity companies and request them to invest capital in the business. So advantages are that, of course, there's a large pool of money in those entities, which will allow the capital to be injected in the business. The drawbacks are that there's a loss of ownership. Most equity investors require some kind of shareholding or ownership stake, and then also control of the business. But it can also be investors to take a stake, because then you get access to a pool of established professionals who have got experience in that particular business and who can then help guide the startup grow through its initial stages to become a fully fledged business. There's also the venture capital option, whereby then you approach a venture capital entity. In this case, then that venture capital firm then provides professional investors who provide advice on business operations. But the drawbacks are sometimes large investments and also will promise large returns. So startups sometimes do not fit within the ambit of venture capitalists because of the amount of money, the expectation of the funds that are required. The other option available is crowdfunding, which my colleague will talk about later on in the presentation. The advantages of this, as will be stated later, are that it allows for a large group of investors to come together to pool funds. So therefore, there is an issue of the spread of the investment being spread among various people, which limits the risk per person. However, then these kind of campaigns are also time consuming and requires a large network for one to achieve the amount of funding that is required. And of course, it is something relatively new in this country, and therefore that needs sensitization for the public to be able to know and for new startups to take advantage of. So before I hand over to crowdfunding, just want to mention a few of the startups which have been in the country for the past couple of years. There's companies like M-Copper, Trigger Foods, Jumia, Glovo, Sandy, Little, and Tosha, Tala, which have grown from startups. Now some of them have left this league and become big players. So it is expected that with the enforcement of the startup bill, the enactment of the startup bill and the enforcement of its regulations, then we'll expect that there'll be a steady growth in the number of startups in the country. So I'll now hand over to my colleague, Rachel, to take us through the crowdfunding presentation. Over to you, Rachel.
Thank you so much, Jomo. That was a good presentation. And like you have seen that we are at a place whereby you are a startup, you have already started your journey, and maybe you have registered, you have actually done everything, but now you are at a crossroad of how am I going to be able to bring this dream into reality? How am I going to make it something that is going to be big and make sure that it reaches the crowd? And how am I going to finance it? So that is where you, as my colleague has already said, that you have different ways of trying to raise capital. He has talked about, if you go back to the next slide, he has talked about raising through family and friends, and you can see the advantages and disadvantages that come through raising money. Also your own savings. The thing about your own savings is sometimes you risk the loss of, you can lose your life and you have nothing saved even for your children. And you realize that that is almost laying all your eggs in one basket. And if all your eggs are in one basket, you risk losing everything if the startup does not move forward. If you also realize also bank loans, it is also quite difficult, though it is reliable. They have a formality. If you see, as we've already talked about startups, they have a timeline of which they've started they've already started between 1 year to 7 years. That is a startup. And if you're a startup, in the place of getting loans, you're looked at as a high risk client. And high risk clients, most of the banks do not want to even look at you or lay anything to give you. So you'll find that the formalities, they know your customer. Most startups are just having, what they have is the idea. They're having a good, maybe governance system, but what they lack at that moment is they don't have assets. And those are the things that you realize that bank loans have to what? They lean towards. Also credits and overdrafts, most of them are expensive and the interests are very high. And you find that if a startup is, when we are just starting, most of the time for the first 1 or 2 or 3 years, your realization of profits is very low. So if you're also raising interests and making sure that you're paying interest, you find that the capital, you're entering into the capital and not making money. So it takes us back to which other means should we use to what? To raise capital without having to harm ourselves a lot. And it brings us back to capital crowdfunding. If you can see that in the past, we have just actually basically defined what crowdfunding is. And in this, we say that crowdfunding is an act of raising small amounts of money obtained from a large number of individuals or entities to either finance or refinance a project or business through a crowdfunding platform. This means there are 3 things: that raising capital through using from a large number of individuals or entities using a platform. So there are 3 the 3 things are individual. I want money. I don't know how to do it. So I go to a platform and ask them, this is how I want to raise money. And then the platform will look out to see if there are other people who are willing to give me money by looking at my what I have done. Now, when you're looking at the platform, also you see that it's a place. The platform is a website, it's internet-based portal, or an application operated by a crowdfunding platform operator, which facilitates crowdfunding. The example of this are like Kickstarter, Pezesha, which is a debt-based crowdfunding platform. Kickstarter, if you can see, it helps the creative and it helps to bring creative projects to life. That's what they say. Of course, usually most of these platforms, you have to pay a percentage of the total amount funded on the site. And what they do for you is that they advertise for you they advertise your idea. They show people what it is, looking at what you're doing. And the people who are interested in it at the end of the day, they become the what? The investors in your platform. The investors in your what? In your business. And those are the ones who can pledge your money, and what financial pledges, it can also be made by and collected through those platforms. Now, the fundraisers are usually charged a fee, like I've said, through the crowdfunding platform. And also you realize that most of these fundraising and stuff, it has to go through the platform because it's also a way of protecting the investors. Now you find that most of, there are many, like we've said, the funding partners and parties usually are the issuer, the person who wants the money, who is receiving the funds, and there's the investor, the person or entity providing the funding, and then the crowdfunding platform, which is the website, the application, and the internet-based platform. The categories of crowdfunding are in two main, there are two. We have the investment-based crowdfunding, which is the one that is the issuer raises funds on the crowdfunding platform in exchange for shares, debt securities, and other investment instruments. And also then you'll find the donation-based, which is for funding for non-profit causes like charities, philanthropy, health or social work, where the donors do not receive any financial or material returns. For example, the Harambee donations, if you can see, there's been also the one Mchanga as an example of it, and also that is part of the donations. You'll find that the donations, they use non-profit projects, like you say, the charity, philanthropy. Somebody has cancer, they go on the platform and they ask for money to be raised, maybe to go to India, or somebody has a tumor that needs to be operated or removed, or somebody like a wheelchair and stuff like that. Also to plant trees, you'll find that most of them are non-profit and people just give. The other one are rewards, whereby you solicit funds in exchange for the product or service. Common for, like for example, you're testing ideas, you're testing a type of phone or a type of product. And so you ask that, let's do this. I give you the product, you pay this amount of money as you're trying to test out the products and stuff like that. The other one is the loan or debt, where funds for debt which has a maturity, the fund is given for debt, and it has a maturity and repayment structure that is scheduled, and an interest. Most of the interest sometimes are not as high as the bank loans and the interest that are coming from different things like the bank draft. They are a certain cap, they have been capped to a certain amount. That does not, of course, cripple the person that is asking, but of course, there has to be a maturity debt that is given to it. The other one is through equity, funds for ownership stake in the company. For example, if you've seen most of these, like my colleague talked about, the new startups that have come up, most of them have a co-founder and a founder. And you find that the co-founders are even coming from different places, investors, foreign investors, who have come and taken shares most of the time, 30%, all these, they will come and give the money and stuff like that. So at the end of the day, they take part of the ownership stake in the company. Those are different models of crowdfunding. Now, one thing I like about crowdfunding is that it sort of takes care of both parties, the investor and the issuer. The investor in this way, that the small investment is required. As I've said already, he's not putting all his money in one basket, all his eggs in one basket, whereby if it does not work, the investor is losing at the same time. The issuer is also losing. So both of them they're on tension. You also realize that he's sharing risks. He's not sharing with himself, but with also other different investors in this time. And also there's diversification of investments. He can invest in your startup, he can invest in another startup, another one, whereby if one is failing, the other one is still working for them and another one. Or if this one is low, he can find a way of also making sure that it's also working. So it helps the investor in all different ways and this makes the investor at the same time like to invest, because they know that they are not giving it their all, though they are still giving and making sure that they're investing in different places. And for the issuer, it works for you because you have access to a large pool of money, and the transaction cost is also low. You'll find that you'll have many people coming in, and at the same time, it minimizes the time spent requesting for money, moving around. Sometimes raising money may take you a year in the other traditional means of trying to raise capital. Here, People who will want it may say, okay, I'll give you a capital of 100,000. Another one will say, I'll give you a capital of 500,000. Another one will say, I'll fund this and doing well. So at the end of the day, you're obtaining money from different pools of investors without having to have one person. One person tends to follow you up most of the time. And at the same time, they end up micromanaging you. So you are on tension. And at the end of the day, you're not running the business with a free will. As we have seen already, there are very many examples of crowdfunding I've already given, and platforms. The crowdfunding platforms, there's Kickstarter, which is foreign. There's GoFundMe. If you see, most of the time people are giving GoFundMe accounts and the people are raising. There's Indiegogo. There's also Mchanga, Lipa and M-Pesa, where the people give M-Pesa pay bill. There's Pesazetu, which has recently been registered with the CMA. In 2020, they got the approval from the CMA. So you see that all these are platforms, and they're also still working in Kenya. Mchanga is working, and I've seen the platform sometimes is raising money for people who are doing charity, for planting trees, for people who are sick. It's also raising money for people who are starting small things, also Pesazetu. Pay bill, you have seen so many times, sent to this pay bill number. We are raising money for this, run for that, and it's really helping and stuff like that. So you realize that all these platforms have been set up to help to quick and easily and to bridge the gap between the funder and the and the funder, who is the investor, and the person who is raising funds, who is the issuer in this matter. As you have seen, one of the things about funding and money is that if it's not well regulated, it will cause problems. One of the problems is money laundering. There is also people running away with monies of the investors who have given them. So this was, and also because of this, you find that people are not willing to give money to a place which is not well regulated, and to avoid fraud, and also people coming to do what they call money washing their money that is not clean. Yes, money laundering. So you find that so this is where the Capital Markets Association came up with the draft CMA, investment-based crowdfunding regulations. And their focus was basically to make sure that it was there to help and to bridge the gap and make sure that there is a regulation that is monitoring the way the funds are managed and with the way the platform is managed and the way money is issued. Their focus mainly is to focus on the investment-based platforms and its participants, who is the issuer and the investors. And also, why did they do this? Because the regulations have been developed to protect investors using crowdfunding platforms from fraud. But at the end of the day, you realize that it does not only protect the investor, it also protects the issuer. Because if the issuer is not if he's not protected from the ones who are giving money in bulk, they end up also fleecing them and making them take like 70% of their, they're making them take over 70% of their amounts, of their shares, and they can easily lose ownership. So you realize that when it is controlled, both of them are getting, at the end of the day, both of them are both benefiting. They're benefiting from this platform. And also regulating a platform helps for the platform not to have extreme and exorbitant interests from the amounts that they are collecting. And also it puts some rules. And the rules, as we have seen in the crowdfunding regulations that have been set up, is that the key point, and I'm going to give the key pointers. That is one, the issuer creates a security or investment instrument, which is the offering and hosted on the platform to be offered to the public. We realize that a crowdfunding offering, it's open for what? For 60 days. That is done by the issuer. It's open for 60 days. Where an issuer is unable to meet the prescribed minimum threshold for the targeted amount, the offer shall be withdrawn, and the crowdfunding platform operator shall effect a refund of the monies to the investor within 48 hours of the said withdrawal. We shall talk about the prescribed threshold for a targeted amount. You also realize the issuer may only commence a fresh crowdfunding offering not earlier than 90 days. And also this, we shall talk about it when we are talking about what it is, who is eligible. Now, we are looking at setting up, it is of course, to set up a platform, the owners are expected to obtain a license from the Capital Markets Authority. So you have to make sure that your platform is registered, as you have seen Pezesha. It's from CMA. It was registered and unaccepted. It's a registered debt-based crowdfunding platform. And who is eligible to have this platform? They say you have to be a company limited by shares with a minimum paid up capital of around 10 million. Now, the setup capital rules also like criteria for onboarding its users, including procedure for onboarding issuers and investors. You have to show that this is how we shall be working. This is how we shall have issuers. An issuer has to have this kind of qualities before we see you and look at you. So you have to have a criteria in each, on how this is supposed to work. And also, it has to show how to transfer the proceeds of each funding round and procedures for monitoring of the proceeds. Most of the times you will do this, they usually have to have another independent person who holds the funds for them, so that they do not mismanage the funds. So they have to have a trust and reliable person or company that deals with this and is able, so the money is paid up to them. And the company, what it does, it's the one that will either take, and if at the end of the day, you don't meet the regulations, they again communicate to the same fund company, the company that is holding the funds, to either take back to the investor, and if the issuer meets the criteria, is able. So this is how the transfer process has to be done. They have to show how it's supposed to be. Also, they have to have the code of conduct and ethics for its users, including misconduct and proposed penalties. For example, if you're there and you are saying that you're taking money for starting a certain prototype, and instead you're getting the money to build houses and real estate, already you have breached the what? The rules, and those are the code of conduct that we are looking at. If you're also not using the money for the purpose that, like you have said, you have raised the money for, that's already a misconduct and you're liable. So all that, the platform has to be able to have those rules. Another one is obligations and liability of its platform users. For example, there have to be terms and conditions that they have to be able to fulfill. What is it? If you put your money in it and something happens, what is my liability? Is there any question?
You can ask it live. Open to questions.
No question at the moment. I think you can proceed.
Okay.
But I encourage you.
He's saying something.
Encouraging to continue.
Okay.
Continue.
So if anyone has a question, they can maybe ask at the end of the presentation. They can write it down and share on a message so that we are able to read it. The other rule is on cybersecurity and backup systems. How are you securing your platform from the fraudsters, from people hacking the platform? And if so, if it is, how are you going to, do you have a backup system in case there is a problem? Because people can come and take over your account and you're not able to get through it. But if you have a backup system or a backup account, I've also seen it sometimes on Instagram. Most of these people who are having over 1 to 10 million followers have backup accounts, and how to recover and disaster recovery mechanism for the platform so that people do not lose information and the investors don't lose. So with all these platform rules set up, if you meet this criteria, then you are eligible to have what? To have a platform, and then the CMA will go ahead and what? And register and approve that your platform. The next one is on the issuers. What are the criteria? Who is eligible to be an issuer? The issuers are people, micro or small enterprises. A micro enterprise, if you have seen as defined in the Micro and Small Enterprise Act 2012, it says that it's a person whose annual turnover, the micro enterprise, whose annual turnover ranges between 500,000 to 5 million. Yes, who does not go beyond 500,000. And also that who has a minimum employee of over 10, that their money does not exceed 500,000 annually, and employees whose employees are less than what 10 people and whose total assets have to be determined by the cabinet secretary. Whereas for the enterprise, the small enterprise, their turnover ranges between 5 million to between 500,000 to 5 million, and employs about over 10 to 50 people, and whose total assets and financial investment shall be, as of course, determined by the cabinet secretary from time to time. So who is that? So are you a micro enterprise or a small enterprise, or like we said, a startup? Are you registered? If to be that, also you have to be registered in Kenya, minimum of 2 years of operation. You will have a good operating track record and good corporate governance track record. How are you handling your businesses? How are you managing your board managing? How are you hiring your people? What is your, how is your turnover, the human resource? What are the things that you're managing crisis? How are you hiring money? How are your shares managed and mismanaged? How are you borrowing? All those things are the things that are looking at. How good is your operating track record? Are you the people people are scared that you may be bankrupt soon? Are you going to have problems of insolvency? And also, how are you paying your CEOs? How are you paying the board? How often do you have your meetings? Who makes your decisions for you? Are your board members the people who have been questioned by different entities for being fraudulent or for having matters in court and stuff like that? Also, if you're registered in Kenya, how are you able to show? Are you registered, but still you're working as a government work and stuff like that? All those things are the ones that they look at if you're to be a micro or small enterprise. And also, if you are a startup, they're looking at your what we're talking about. Do you have good operating and governance track record? This, you realize that a startup is given a little threshold, because a startup is basically, most of them don't even have the money. So that you see that how are you starting? Do you have a good idea? What is your idea looking like? What is the operating system that you're coming out with? How are you going to do in the future? How are you going to work out your business in the future without having problems and stuff like that? Then also we are looking at issuers. How much can you raise? Maximum amount within a 12-month period. For medium enterprises, they're saying it has to be about 100 million for medium enterprises. For small enterprises, it's between 50 million. It's for 15 million. And then for micro enterprises, that is the person whose capital turnover is 500 million. Small enterprises, it's between 500,000 for micro enterprises, then between 500 to 5 million for small enterprises. Those are, you're only able to raise 50 million, but you can still apply. If you want to raise more than that, you can still apply for a period. But if you're an eligible issuer, you can offer maximum great amount of investment. If you can still ask the CMA to have a letter of no objection, so that you can raise even more money than that. So with all this, you are looking at yourself if you are an issuer. How about investors? As an investor, to be an eligible investor for crowdfunding, you have to be sophisticated, a sophisticated investor. For this, we have to define who is a sophisticated investor. One is that they are aware of the transaction. They have the amount of the money that they know how much they are aware of the business. They have the technical know-how of the business. 1, 2, they have the amount of money to fund the business. They are aware of the risks that will come in case they invest and stuff like that. So a sophisticated investor is looked at somebody who is in most cases, who has the means of investing, one, who knows the risks that you can take when you're doing the investment and stuff like that. Also, another one who is eligible is also an individual retail investor, the small people who can come in and say, I'm doing this just because my business is working and stuff like that. And also maximum investment is for the crowdfunding is around 100,000. Investment instrument allowed for purposes of crowdfunding may include shares, bonds, or debentures, and other instruments as the authority shall approve. How about the crowdfunding regulations platform operator? Operator's eligibility for licensing. The company limited by shares, like we have said, is within a minimum of 10 million. If you're seeing application fee, the platform has to pay 10,000 shillings, and the licensing and annual regulatory fees of 200,000. So all those, you'll find that it's 10,210,000 shillings. You have to have it. So the regulation crowdfunding transactions, what do they say? Investment instruments allowed of crowdfunding, that is shares, bonds, debentures, or any other instruments as approved, as we've already said. The offer is open for not more than 60 days. So if you have to be aware that your offer takes 60 days and not more than that. After that, it is taken back and then you issue again. If the minimum targeted amount is not met, the offer is withdrawn and the crowdfunding platform operator shall refund the monies to investors. If you want 5 million because you are micro, and they only raise 1.5, and which means the target has not been met. So at the end of the day, you take back, the platform will write, and the money is taken back to the operator within 48 hours. The issuer may only commence a fresh crowdfunding offering not earlier than 90 days after the date of withdrawal. So you have to take time to go back and rearrange yourself and realign your funds and realize how you want. You may either go back and ask for less on stuff. Where the crowdfunding transaction is successful, the crowdfunding platform operator shall make the funds available to the issuer within 24 hours after the close of the offer. Investors have also a cooling off period of 48 hours within which the investor can withdraw an offer or agreement to purchase the securities or investment instrument by delivering a notice to the crowdfunding platform. So this is very good because it means you have also a way out. If you're not sure, you have given your money, but you're still not sure whether it is you're going to have something in return, you quickly can, within 48 hours, you can ask that the money be returned to you without having to incur anything and not regretting in the future. What are the factors that promote growth in the Kenyan crowdfunding space? You realize that mobile money wide acceptance and reach in Kenya. Everywhere you go, Kenya is uploaded even in places like Egypt where there are meetings, and there has been, for example, we have been having the Kenyan Innovation Week. Most of the time, the people who are talking at the talks they're giving is they're applauding Kenya for having a wide acceptance mobile reach. For example, the M-Pesa things that we are having, it is so wide and everywhere, and it's something that has been accepted, and it is something that is working. And you'll find that even countries out there, when they send you money on their different platforms, it comes to your platform, to your M-Pesa, and it is easy. And you find that even if you're in Turkana, you're in Lodwar, you're in the western part, in Mumias and all those places, you're in Mtwapa, all places, money can reach you, mobile money can reach you. So you'll find that this crowdfunding platform is really good. It's technologically accepted, and it's very good because Kenya has accepted it and it's technologically sound. You'll see that there's also community support, and Kenyans' generosity in part of Kenya's makeup. The Harambee spirit. Kenyans really are very good when it comes to changa, in quicker money, helping somebody. They quickly want. So you'll find that if you have an idea and it benefits a need and it's able to take care of somebody's need and be able to take care of the society and people are quickly willing to put in money and quickly help you. When somebody is unwell, if you go to the Mchanga, the platforms, or the M-Pesa platform, someone is unwell and they need an operation as soon as possible. Somebody needs blood, somebody needs something. Quickly, it goes as wild as possible. You find that their target is 80 million, and within a short while, they've already reached the amount. So the community support and generosity in Kenya is very welcoming. There's also a lot of informal lending platform and groups, which are also chamas. You'll find that these small ways of raising funds, chamas, they quickly help the low-end businesses, the mama mbogas. They quickly have a way of quickly supporting each other. without having to break down their kiosks and go back to the streets looking for other ways of getting money. You also see that the donation, another way that supports the growth of this crowdfunding is the donation-based crowdfunding platforms, like we have talked about Mchanga, and it's a form of digital Harambee platform. People are quickly helping you to donate you and help you solve a need. What are the next steps in crowdfunding for startups? Given the advantages of crowdfunding as a means of raising capital as compared to the traditional model, how would you think how we are looking at how can a startup prepare to make advantage? How can we raise this? For example, what do we start with? If already you have done a startup, you have raised and incorporated a business entity. What is the next step? Implement and maintain a good operating policy and procedure. Have a good governance system. Work yourself through it. Make sure that you have good books of accounts. Make sure that you have this, because if you are not, you will not be eligible as an issuer. If you have not opened a company, you will not be eligible, because nobody can fund into where they cannot receive, especially for the investment based. If it is for the charities, the NGOs and places, they are giving you to see what you are working with. So they will need to see your model, your business model. They will need to see how you are operating, how is your operating system? How are you helping, for example, to plant these trees? How are you doing it? What is the means in which you are working with it? Anything that is not clear raises suspicion, and that makes the investors to run. So you need to make sure that you have for your crowdfunding to work for you. So we have reached that level of, is there any question that you want us to help you with, or something that I've left out that could really be of importance to us? Any questions?
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Rachel. That was a very informative presentation. We have one question by one of our partners, Francis Kakai, and he is asking, are the requirements to be an issuer under the crowdfunding regulations too stringent, such that it will lock out many startups that do not have proper or well-developed corporate governance procedures in place?
One of the first things we need to understand when the platform is raised is for two people. They will benefit at the end of the day. One of the things CMA's basic objective is to protect the investor. So when the investor comes in and is trying to give you and is trying to fund you as an issuer, one of the things they have to look at is, how are you managing this? If you are managing it, who should I report to? Who should I ask questions? A good corporate governance system is a system that makes you be able to be accountable for any losses, accountable for issues. Yes, so you'll find that this works for both you, because it makes you have a discipline of accountability for the system that you put in place. It makes you also have accountability for the things that you have set up. If you have said that you are going to be a person, your crowdfunding, if you have said that your business or entity is going to be, for example, to build, let us say, if you're going to have a phone or this kind of phone system that works in this way, or let us say it is for boda, quick pickup, maybe you call it a quick pickup for helping transport logistics. And then instead of doing the transport logistics with the boda, instead you're using it for something else. You're using it to borrow money and hire money. You'll find that the rules and regulations, they come in place to help you to be able to not fleece the investor in some of these ways. But on the other hand, how it also affects me, because if I am starting and I have not raised the money well, and I have not yet put this in place, it sort of limits me. But that takes me to go back to the drawing board. So when I start with the discipline. I already have my shareholders in place. I have the board. I've already put aside people who will help me manage. And I've already put people who will give me accountability. If you are going to raise funds on the crowdfunding platform, you already have a system in place that is going to be able to convince these people to give you money. If it is not in place, you are risking the person and also you're risking yourself. I don't know if I have answered you. Maybe.
Francis, I hope that answer is satisfactory. As we get a response from Francis, there's also a question from Irene. She's asking, my biggest challenge is marketing my products. I manufacture hair deep treatment conditioners and lotions and etc. Walking into cosmetic shops and supermarkets hasn't helped. Is there any organization or platform that can help?
Maybe I can answer that. Thank you, Modoni, for your question. So I guess then I don't know, you would then be considered as a startup for the purposes of this discussion, and you're now trying to look for ways to expand your business, to grow your business, and to expand your reach into the Kenyan market. So of course you have the traditional marketing methods that are available, in terms of advertising, trying to reach out to the existing models for distribution and bring out your product to the public. However, one key thing to be noted is that you also then might need support to have a look at your business model, your financials and your targets. So then it can be looked at to be seen whether that is a viable model that can be shared with potential investors. As Nigeria, we have a model whereby we can able to work with established partners who can then assist to look at your books, look at your model, and help you grow your reach, help you introduce you to third-party providers who can help improve your marketing reach. So you can reach out to us through our website. You can also send us an email on info@nigeria.com, and then we'll be able to then understand your concerns. We also have a consultation forum where you can reach out to us. And then as we discuss further, we're able to then put you in touch with the right person who will give you guidance to then improve your marketing reach. Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Irene. I hope the answer is satisfactory. There are no more questions, but I'd like to invite comments or questions at this time. Irene has replied and said she will reach out to you, Njomo.
Thank you, Irene. We look forward to it.
Okay. Yeah. So as we come to an end, I'd like to tell you more about Necheria International. And Necheria International is a technology-driven online legal service that serves unique legal needs and other requirements for startups, techpreneurs, and companies using disruptive technologies by providing specialist and quality online legal services. So check out our website. I have shared the link in the chat box and check out what we do. Any other comment before we close or question? There being no other question, I will close. We will share the recording and the presentation after this. Feel free to reach out. For questions even after this. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, participants.